Good evening, dear students. Give me a second. I want to stream this class for you to watch it later. Where's this? There we are. Fantastic. So, okay, more people are joining us. Very good. So, good evening, dear students. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Today it's Wednesday. I want to start this class by doing the following. Sorry for this. Today, maybe many of you are not from Bolivia, but today in Bolivia, we have a national day, and today is basically the Students' Day. So I want to congratulate to wish you a happy Students' Day. Maybe although you are not from Bolivia, you see that here we have this special day for students. So I just wanted to say happy Students' Day, all right? As I say, maybe in other countries, you don't celebrate on the student date, or maybe you celebrate the War Students' Day, but here we have a special one. So congratulations, okay? Happy Students' Day. First thing I wanted to say. All right. So what else? Now, as we have been discussing previously, today we're going to be basically looking at the listening section and continuing with our advance. Do you remember that yesterday we had been able to discuss the general aspects of this section, and we had also been able to get into the first type of question. And that is exactly what we are going to be doing tonight as well. We're going to continue with the types of questions. And finally, we are going to, basically end with the theoretical aspects of this section. And then we're going to move on tomorrow and as well on Friday to the practical classes that I know many of you are waiting and longing for that. But don't worry, tomorrow and basically on Friday, we are going to be practicing everything we have learned about this section, all right? But first of all, let's finalize and let's get into the types of questions that we have not discussed yet. So let's get into this one, all right? Let us discuss the second type of question. This is called function question, all right? So basically, the TOEFL listening function questions will test your ability to understand why a certain idea or argument has been used in the passage. They will ask you to draw conclusions about the information that has been spoken in the passage. The question will replay a segment of the recording that contains the topic of the question, and then we'll replay just the topic. This is something very easy. Think about, for example, when we are, let's say, when we are crying. Why do we cry? Or for example, when you are discussing with somebody and you start to speak loudly. Why do you speak loudly? Or for example, when you are laughing, why do you laugh? I think that as human beings, we always have reasons, right, for things we do. If we lie, or if we, for example, laugh, or if we speak loudly, there are reasons, right? We always do every single action because of a reason, right? There is a reason why we do different activities, different attitudes of our own person's behaviors are determined by reasons we have for behaving or having a particular attitude. Now, that also applies to our conversations. That is to say, there are reasons why we say all the words that our mouth basically spills out. So what I want to express is that in this particular type of question, you are going to be asked about why does the particular professor or person in the conversation say something? Why? What motive? What reason does he have in order to express a particular sentence, a particular phrase, as we are going to be able to practice right now, okay? So please accompany me. We're going to get into our simulator, and I'm going to give you an illustration so you can understand this one easily. So let us get into that. Open here, simulator. Where is this? Maybe I'll close this, and this, and this is not necessary. And let's get into our practice. So here we have it. Listening, answer, and answer, quiz mode. All right. we are going to go for another one. Just 1 second. Well, we're gonna go for this one, but just let me check if the type of question is included in this one. Yes. Okay, fantastic. So, dear students, now let us listen together to this particular lecture on, in this case, biology. And please try to apply all the recommendations that I gave you yesterday for how to write down your notes efficiently, and try to understand nonetheless what is the main idea of this particular class, all right? Because we're going to use all the information you managed to collect in your notes in order to illustrate this type of question and to respond it correctly, okay? So please listen to this and take your notes applying all the recommendations and tips that I gave you yesterday. Let's go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Today, we're going to discuss the genetics of eye color. Parents just love seeing similarities between themselves and their children. You know, they'll often say things like, "Oh, he has my nose," or "she has my cheekbones." Now, in the same way, they sometimes expect that a child will have either the mother's or the father's eye color. So, at times they'll get confused when a child is born with an eye color phenotype that neither parent has. This means that the child will have a different eye color than either parent.
Excuse me, sir, but isn't it the parent's genotype, the collection of genes that each parent has? Isn't it the genotype that determines a child's phenotype? And wouldn't this mean that a child's eye color would have to match that one of his parents?
It should be so simple, Marissa. But eye color is one of those features where the genetics are slightly more complex. Yes, Jack?
I'm sorry, but I need you to back up a little bit. Could you first explain what a genotype and phenotype are again? I feel like I don't even know about.
No worries, I was getting to that. A genotype is the combination of genes or DNA that codes for a certain trait. A phenotype is the expression of those genes. More specifically, the phenotype is the actual eye color that results from the combination of genes, or genotype, that that person has. In the end, the specific eye color is determined by the amount of a substance called melanin in the iris of the eye. To complicate matters further, the iris has two layers, an inner one and an outer one.
Well, before we get to the layers, could you please clarify what an iris is exactly?
Of course. The iris is that thin, round area in the eye that has the eye color. Now, depending on how much melanin is found in each of the two layers of the iris, the eye color can be blue, green, brown, gray, or hazel. To put it simply, the more melanin is found in each layer, then the darker the eye color will appear. Because melanin is like ink. It's like ink for the eye. There are at least two pairs of genes that affect eye color, but some researchers believe that there are as many as 8 genes responsible.
So, how are blue eyes produced, like mine?
Well, in blue eyes, the front layer of the eye has no melanin. Some people have so much melanin in the front layer that their eyes appear very dark brown or black. Different levels of melanin in the inner and outer layer determine the different types of eye colors. Now, the pattern in which melanin is deposited is also determined by genetics. It can be deposited in rings, clouds, radial stripes, or even spread over the entire iris. There are actually a lot of different genes that affect the amount of melanin that will be produced in any one person.
Oh, I have a question. So my little cousin is 2.5, and she had bright blue eyes when she was born. Well, actually, she had bright blue eyes up until like 2 months ago, when suddenly her eyes started to get darker and darker, and, well, now they're hazel. So how can that happen?
I am glad you asked that. It transitions us right forward into our next point. Now, many babies are born with blue eyes. And this is because the melanin is produced slowly from birth until about age 3. So a person's true eye color is not clearly determined until that age. Depending on what the genotype dictates, the production of melanin will stop when the correct phenotype is expressed in the eye color. Like I said, scientists used to believe that there was only one gene responsible for eye color, but now we think there may be as many as 7 or 8 genes that play a role in it. Genes are like recipes that make up a cookbook. They tell your body and organs what to do and in what way to make you. Just like certain ingredients in a recipe, your genes have certain ingredients that are dominant. This means that the dominant version of the gene will be expressed. Now, for an example, brown eye color is dominant over blue. This means that if a child gets a gene that codes for blue color from the mom and a gene that codes for brown color from the dad, the child will eventually have brown eyes. This is because brown eye color is dominant over blue eye color. Now, this would be advantageous in nature, seeing as blue eyes are associated with an increased risk for some serious degenerative illnesses.
All right, there we are. Very long lecture in this case, right? Nonetheless, now let us get into how would this type of question be. Let me here go to the question. Now, remember we are discussing right now the purpose question. And it basically asks, why does in this case, why does the professor mention a particular thing? There must be a reason why the professor says something, right? So we're gonna look for that particular reason. Now, the way that this is gonna work, dear students, is that the software of the exam is going to display for you part of the lecture again. This is something very important, okay? But please don't get excited because it's not basically it's going to replay the passage again overall. You are not going to listen to the passage entirely, but you're going to listen to a portion of the lecture, and then you're going to listen to the specific sentence that the question is asking you for. Because look at the question, it says, why does the professor say this? So what this, basically the question means a particular sentence that is going to be presented to you at the end of the audio record that you are going to listen again, okay? But first, before you get that particular sentence that the question is asking you for, you are going to get context, or basically you're going to get a little bit more of information that is going to help you to remember what you listened, okay? So by the way, I'm going to click here play, but in the actual exam, you don't have to click, you don't have to click play, or you don't have to reproduce the audio because everything is done automatically. There's going to be a voice in your headphones that says, now please listen to this part of the passage again, and then respond, and then beep, I sound like a little bit, beep, and then the audio is basically reproduced. So let us listen.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
In the end, the specific eye color is determined by the amount of a substance called melanin in the iris of the eye. To complicate matters further, the iris has 2 layers, an inner one and an outer one.
Why does the professor say this?
To complicate matters further, the iris has 2 layers, an inner one and an outer one.
There you are. So as you can see, why does the professor say this? And here we have some options. So why does the professor say this? As I said, by the word this, it means, as I told you, the last part.
Listen again, professor
Here.
say this. Why does the professor say this?
This is a sentence.
To complicate matters further, the iris has 2 layers, an inner one and an outer one.
The rest of the audio recording was, as I said, context, but the question is asking you for the last sentence. After the speaker says, now, why does the professor say this? And that is the last sentence. And the last sentence that you listen to is the sentence the question is asking for. Okay, so please pay attention to that. The rest of the things that you listened are context for you to get the idea more easily. Now, we have some options. To clarify that eye colors only resides in one layer of the iris, to suggest that there are too many genes involved in determining a person's eye color, to suggest that genetics are not an important factor in determining eye color, or to set the stage for a thorough explanation of how eye color is determined. So which one is the correct answer? Why does the professor say this? To clarify that eye color it only resides in one layer of the iris, to suggest that there are too many genes involved in determining a person's eye color, or to suggest that the genetics are not an important factor in determining eye color, or to set the stage for a thorough explanation of how eye color is determined. Let us listen to this again.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
In the end, the specific eye color is determined by the amount of a substance called melanin in the iris of the eye. To complicate matters further, the iris has two layers, an inner one and an outer one.
Why does the professor say this?
To complicate matters further, the iris has two layers, an inner one and an outer one.
There you are. Fantastic. So here you have it. Now, what is the correct answer in this case? Let me give you some recommendations before we get into the actual response. So, for example, recommendations for this type of question. In order to correctly choose your answers, dear students, you must be very precise. Oh, I'm gonna expand this, I'm sorry. You must be very precise, as I told you. No, here we are. So you must be very precise in asking yourself the following question. What effect does the alluded portion have over the context or topic? It might initiate, correct, imply, redirect, or rhetorically postulate something. Now, also, pay attention to the alluded portion's mode. It could be interrogative, exclamative, subjunctive, indicative, and so forth. What I mean by this, dear students, is that, it's very important to think, what is this particular sentence doing? It is a question, it is a statement, it is correcting, it is initiating something, it's redirecting the conversation, it's implying something. What is this sentence doing? And secondly, pay attention to the way that the professor expresses the sentence. If he expresses it as a question, could this be true? Then, maybe the correct answer is going to be that he is trying to question something. Or if he says, this is the way, right? Something like that. Maybe he's trying to make a point, to rhetorically postulate something. Or if he says, now this is going to help us to initiate a new topic, then it is initiating something, right? Or, for example, overall or finally, we can see that this is the case. So that will be finalizing something, right? So pay attention to the words. Think about what is the sentence doing? What effect does it have? It implies something, redirects the topic, it initiates an idea, finalizes an idea, it is interrogative, subjunctive, indicative. What is it, right? Think about these two questions. And then when you think about these two questions, you can respond the question correct. Let's go and see this one. Let me check here the correct answer, just in case. Okay, here. Fantastic. Yes, this is this one. So, for example, dear students, in this case, what is the correct answer? The correct answer is that the reason why the professor says this is to set the stage for a thorough explanation of how eye color is determined. Why? There are two reasons why this is the correct answer. As you can see here, I chose this one just in order to discard it because I had that little doubt there because this is a content that I had not seen in a long time. But yes, it's the fourth one as I had thought. So the fourth one, let me tell you why this is the correct answer. Because if you think about the way that the sentence is set, he says, right? There are actually two layers in the iris, and that means that makes everything more complicated. So if you think about it and if you remember the passage, the reason why the professor says that there are two different layers in the iris and this complicates matters is because he is about to make an explanation of how eye color is expressed, right? You remember that all the rest of the lecture is about how eye color is determined in somebody. And the reason why he says the fact that the iris has two layers complicates things even more is because he is worried about the fact that he needs to explain that. And because he needs to explain how eye color is determined, he is worried because, as I mentioned, the fact that the iris has two different layers is going to make the subject way more complicated. So that's the reason why he says, in order, or something like to top it up, para colmo, it's as if you were saying like that, right? It's as if you were trying to say, to top it off, right? Para colmo, we have two layers in the iris. And therefore, the explanation that comes right after this sentence is going to be more complicated for his students to understand. And that is exactly what happened, right? Because his students were asking him constantly a lot of questions and saying, hey, can you clarify this? What do you mean by this? So, but what about this, right? So there were a lot of questions. So as I say, this is the correct answer because you have to think about what is this sentence doing? And what this sentence is doing, what is provoking is, as I said, redirecting the conversation. Because from here on, if you remember, because you have your notes, right? That's the reason why you are taking your notes. From here on, the professor discusses how is color eyes determined. So given that that is the case, you know that the reason why the professor says this particular sentence is to set the stage for a thorough explanation of how eyes color is determined, to explain how is that people get your eyes color. So as I say, two questions to ask yourself. What is this sentence doing? And what mode does the sentence have? In this case, what is the mode of this sentence is ironical, right? Because it says, to top it up or to make things more complicated, the iris has two different layers. So he's basically being ironic, right? He's laughing at himself because he knows that what he's about to explain is going to be difficult, right? So the mode of this sentence is a little bit ironical, let's say hilarious. So you have to think about that and you say, okay, he's setting the stage for a very difficult explanation of how eyes color is determined, right? Is that clear, dear students? Any question that I could clarify? Camila, Jorge, Anaí, Fabiana, Sergio, anything?
Everything is clear.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Anaí.
Everything clear, Carlos.
Okay, thank you very much, your Sergio. There you are. All right. So there are no questions. Okay, no questions. So let's move on to the to the third type of question. So to this one, inference question. This is actually a very interesting question, and for the ones who have been already present in the reading section, for the group who was present last week in the reading section, they know about this one because in the reading section there is a type of question that is exactly the same. It's called inference question. Now let me tell you what is an inference question. An inference question basically is a question that is going to ask you to make an inference. For the new students, do you know what is an inference? An inference is basically a conclusion that you can make out of information you have. Imagine, for example, that you have a friend who always wears colorful clothes. He always wears red, blue, yellow, pink clothes. But suddenly, for some reason, you see that he starts to write down on his Facebook, I miss you very much. And next day, you see this person wearing just black clothes. He also is wearing black shoes. He's wearing a black t-shirt, black pants, all black. When in the past, as I told you, this friend of yours always dressed very colorful clothes. Now, because of that information you have about your friend, that he started to post on his Facebook, I miss you very much, and he is now wearing black clothes, what could you infer? What would be your inference? Your inference would be that he lost somebody he loved, right? That somebody that he loved died. And that is what an inference is, that although he never told you that his family, somebody in his family died, because of the information you have about him, you can infer, make a conclusion that is rational, logical about what the information tells you, okay? That is an inference, to make a conclusion that is logical, well-sustained, justified of information you have, from information you have. In this case, your friend quotes, your friend's post on Facebook that I miss you very much, and the fact that he never said anything to you about that particular loss, all of that indicates you that he is basically wearing black clothes because he's in pain, right? Because he lost somebody. Now, how can you identify this type of question? Look at these wordings, okay? If you see a question similar to one of these examples, then you know, okay, this is an inference question. Look at it. It says, what can be inferred from the professor's discussion of X? What will the student probably do next? Or what is implied when the speaker says this? Reply a short second, okay? So this is it. Now, dear students, let's go to see an example of this one. Now, remember that yesterday, okay, oh no, actually no, we're gonna listen again, dear students, to a new conversation in this case. So please take your notes, apply what we saw yesterday, and we are going to be discussing the question with this particular lecture later. Okay, so let's go and listen to a conversation and a lecture about a student and an administrator. Let's go.
Listen to a conversation between a student and an administrator at the university's finance office.
Hi there. Can I help you?
I really hope you can. I'm worried I'm just really worried I'm going to be in trouble.
Oh, Well, don't panic. Just relax. I'm sure we can deal with whatever's going on. What's the issue?
Well, I've received two separate statements about my tuition payments in the last week, and they seem to. It looks like they kind of contradict each other.
Uh-huh.
I've been a student here for 2 years, and I've never gotten any notice like this before. The language seems a little threatening, and I'm afraid that if I don't figure this out, I'll be kicked out of classes or something.
I can assure you that nobody's going to kick you out of class. We'll sort it out. Now, did you bring the letters with you?
Yep, I have them right here. The first one is similar to the reminder I get every month to make a payment, but
Here, let me see.
it has some extra language out of the norm there at the bottom. It says something about penalty payments.
All right. And did you miss any payments that you know of?
No, I've never missed one.
That's strange. And what about the second notice you received?
That one says it's the final warning to make a payment, or else my enrollment will be canceled. That doesn't make any sense because it's the first warning I ever got.
Okay, are you sure these are the only two notices you got in the mail from us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, then, it certainly seems like there's been an error, because if the statement were accurate, you would have received additional notices from us. Let me just look up your account in our database and see what the problem is.
Thank you so much. I'm just a little stressed out that something will go wrong with my classes.
Oh, sure. Just a moment while I... Huh, here we go. I think I found the problem. Did you make your last payment during a school holiday?
Sure, I mean, I think I did. I guess I made the payment during spring break. Is that a problem?
Well, you didn't do anything wrong, but it looks like there was an error in our system. The computer is supposed to automatically process payments when the offices are closed, but for some reason, your payment never went all the way through. It's still pending approval.
So why did I get only a final warning notice?
Well, I'm not completely sure, to be honest. We were coming back from a holiday, so there may have been some confusion.
Well then, I mean, what do I have to do to fix this?
Nothing at all. I'm approving the payment now and noting on your account that the error was ours. Just make your next payment on time and you won't have any more problems.
Wonderful. Thanks for taking care of this. That's a huge relief.
All right, there you are. So fantastic. As I was mentioning, dear students, now let's go to review the inference question. Okay, so what is the inference question for this particular conversation? What can be inferred about the student? That will be the question. As you can see, this is very similar to the questions we have here, right? What can be inferred about this, right? And here we have what can be inferred about the student. Now, we have some options. He wants to stop getting notices from the college. B, his primary concern is being allowed to attend classes. C, he wants to leave the tuition office quickly. Or D, he's worried about accidentally paying tuition twice. Which one is the correct response here, dear students? Now, before we respond, let us give you some recommendations. Don't forget that although you are asked to infer something, this doesn't mean you can separate yourself from the passage and let your imagination to fly. This is a clarification I wanted to make, dear students. Inferring is not the same as imaginating. When you infer something, okay, you are always letting the information you have to guide you. It's because of the information you have, okay, because of the information you have that you make a conclusion that is logical from that. But for example, you could not use your imagination and imagine whatever you want. For example, remember previous illustrations, your friend wearing black clothes suddenly, you could infer that somebody in his family died, and that would be a rational inference. But what about thinking maybe some aliens came to his house and stole all the colorful clothes he had, and that's the reason why he's just wearing black clothes, right? That is using your imagination, right? Because you're saying aliens came to his home and stole all his black clothes. I mean, that is imaginating, right? That is not making an inference, because inference is always rational and it's always justified by the information you have, okay? So an inference is always rational and always justified by the information you have. Let the information you have, in this case, the conversation, to guide you, all right? You must infer, but only with the information provided in the passage, okay? Very important. Here, so which one is the correct answer here? Let me tell you, the correct answer in this case is his primary concern is being allowed to attend classes. Now, let me tell you why. The primary concern of this student was being allowed to attend classes is the correct inference. And the reason for this is, if you notice, the first thing he mentioned to the administrator after explaining her his problem was that he was very much scared of being kicked out of classes. He did not want to be kicked out of classes, dear students, right? He said, I don't want to be kicked out of classes, please help me, right? This was the first thing he said to her. And at the end of the passage, at the end of the conversation, he again repeats that, please help me. I was afraid that I was not able to attend classes, right? He repeats this topic at the end and at the beginning. This is what he was thinking about during the entire conversation. He wanted to be able to attend classes normally, right? So this is the reason why you can infer that, because these are the first things and the last things he says to this particular person, okay? So that, of course, shows you that he's somebody who is very much worried and preoccupied about that, and that will be his primary concern. Now, what about A? He wants to stop getting notices from the college. This is not the correct answer because it's confusing the information. In the conversation, he never says that he's mad or he's angered because he's receiving notices. What he says is that he's angered because he received another notice apart from the usual ones he receives that says that he has not paid, although he says that he did pay. Can you see? He's not mad, or he does not want to stop receiving notices from college, but he just wants to receive the normal ones, the ones that correspond to him, not one that says you have not paid when he actually paid, right? That is what he told her, but not that he wants to stop getting notices from the college overall. What about C? He wants to leave the tuition office quickly. Not the correct answer again, because he doesn't say something like, please hurry up, I want to go to the bathroom, or something like that, right? He never says that. Therefore, this is not the correct answer again. And D, he's worried about accidentally paying tuition twice. Again, this is something that is erroneous. He says that he paid once and that the university is not recognizing that, not that he paid twice and he had a trouble. No. Okay, so this is how you have to infer. Think about the information you have. What does that information tell you? If you see this student asking consistently, I don't want to be kicked out of I don't want to be kicked out of classes. I don't want to be banned from classes, etc., etc., etc. Well, what can you infer? This person is primary concerned about being allowed to attend classes. Any questions, dear students, about this one? Camila, Sergio, Jorge, Anaí, Fabiana? Doubt, concerns? Tell me. Anything.
No, it's no questions, Carlos.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Sergio. What about the rest? Camila, Jorge, Anaí, Fabiana, questions?
No questions.
No questions.
All right, fantastic. There you are. So this is very important, okay? Inferring. How do you infer? Making conclusions that are logical from the information you have. In this case, you have to think very much about this one. But as I say, let the information to guide you. The information always suggests, okay? Always suggests different things. If you allow the information to suggest what is the correct conclusion, you are done. You're always going to respond correctly, all right? Very good. 4, detailed questions, okay? Let us discuss this one. What are detailed questions? Well, detailed questions are basically equivalents to the factual questions from the TOEFL reading section. They deal with specific facts from the listening section, but they are not usually as specific as detailed questions in the reading section. Because you don't have the option of listening to the recording a second time, you will depend on your information that you wrote in your notes. This type of question, dear students, is, in my opinion, the normal type of question that we always have in our exams at the university and high school. Of course, if you live in South America and Central America. As far as I know, it's always very similar. Dear students, it's a matter of as I told you, knowing always, as I told you, that in the university or in high school, you always receive questions. For example, the professor says, students, we're going to have an exam tomorrow. Read from page 20 until page 30. And when the day of the exam comes, you receive a paper that has a lot of questions, right? And the question says, according to page number 23, what was the year of the French Revolution? Because of course, maybe from page 20 until page 30, you read about the French Revolution. So maybe it asks you, what did the page 23 said about the French Revolution? And that is exactly the case here. That is exactly the situation for this type of question. It's simply going to ask you, what does the conversation or what does the listening passage say about this? What does the listening passage say about this? What does the professor say about this? Why did the student do this? What is the reason that the student do this? Anything like that, okay? It's simply a question asking you about information mentioned in the listening passage. It's not something that you need to infer. It's not something that you need to conclude. It's not something that you need to, for example, as we saw in the first type of question, it's not a vocabulary question. It's not anything of that sort. No, it's simply a question that, as I said, is going to ask you about, as I told you, to respond to what did the passage say about a particular matter. What did the student say here? What did the professor indicate about here? Why, excuse me, not why. What does the lecturer say about this? What are the three different mechanisms mentioned in the lecture, etc., etc., etc. Questions like that, okay? For this reason, detailed questions in the listening section rarely deal with very specific information like numbers or names. Instead, they focus on those facts that you would normally recognize as important, okay, as you listen to the recording. Detailed questions are usually in harmony as well with the main idea of the recording. Okay, so as I say, don't worry, for example, about maybe even the lecture I listened to, they mentioned the year of the French Revolution, so I need to always memorize that date. No, don't worry about that, okay? Because in these detailed questions, they are not going to be that strict and that specific. They are not going to ask you for names, for dates, or for numbers, okay? For example, if it says the French Revolution basically lasted for 17 years, they are not going to ask you in the questions for that particular lecture, how many years did the French Revolution last? No, they are not going to ask you that. They're going to ask you more general questions, but nonetheless, as I say, they are questions about the information you received. What was the French Revolution? Who participated in the French Revolution? What were the main reasons that led the French people to make a revolution? Things of that sort, right? If, of course, you received a lecture or a passage that was about the French Revolution, right? It's about receiving questions that are regarding any topic. But as I say, these questions are always asking you, what does the passage say about this? No more than that. Let's see an example. Not here. So for example, for this type of question, for the conversation we have listened about the student complaining that he received a particular notice from his college saying that he didn't pay, although he paid. This would be the detailed question. What problem does the student have? As you can see, it's a very basic question. It's basically asking, what did the conversation say about the student, or what did the student say about himself in the conversation? It's, as I say, asking you about details, asking you about information, nothing else, right? We have some options. He received another student's tuition statement. B, he received a notice that his statement was late. C, he forgot to pay tuition during a holiday week. D, he has been barred from attending classes, right? So which one would be the correct answer in this case, dear students? Let's see. The correct answer in this case, before we responded, let us look at some recommendations. These questions may be presented to you in two different formats, okay? The first one consists in one choice questions, which means you will just have to choose one possible response. And secondly, the second format will give you the chance to choose multiple answers from a series of possible answers. Typically, there is an announcement that says, choose two responses. The reason why I tell you this is because sometimes in this type of questions, dear students, you have to choose more than one answer. Remember, until this point, you've been basically used to always choosing one, right? For example, this one, or this one, or this one. But in this type of question, something that usually happens is that the platform or the software allows you to choose two different answers because, of course, the question has two different responses. So as I say, you always have to pay attention to that. If the, let me show you here. Here I have an example. Look at this. Maybe this would be a detailed question for, let's say, the only one response. According to the professor, what does liquid water signify about a planet? And as you can see here, you just have, you just have the capacity to choose one particular response. You are not able to choose two of them. But notice this other example. According to the professor, what problems would gas planets have in sustaining life? Choose two answers. So as I say, sometimes this type of question asks you for choosing two different responses or maybe three. So pay attention to that little commentary that says choose two answers, choose three answers, choose four answers. Or if it doesn't say anything, it means that you have just you are being required to choose just one particular response, right? So please pay attention to that. It's very important. Now, other recommendations. The only thing you must do here is to remind the passage or consult your notes to find the answer. To respond this question type, you must ask yourself, what does the passage, the listening passage in this case, specifically say about this? Once you found the portion, remind the correct answer will express the same information. Maybe the words will be a little bit different, but the content must be equal. This is very important. Now, second, wrong answers will typically try to confuse you by linking some ideas found in the passage erroneously. False answers will also use some correct vocabulary from the passage, but they will not actually respond to the question, or they could even combine textual information with extra made-up information. Then apply all this into this question. For example, here you don't have a phrase or let's say an explanation or a specification that says that you need to choose two answers. So you need, in this case, to choose only one particular answer. Okay, that is something that you can know because nothing in the question says choose two answers, choose three answers, right? You don't see that here. So therefore, you just have to choose one answer. Now, how do we apply our recommendations? Ask yourself, what does the listening passage say? What did the conversation say? What was the problem of this student? Here you have the options. The correct response in this case, your students will be B. He received a notice that his payment was late. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why, dear students. He received a notice that his payment was late. Why is this the correct answer? The correct answer, dear students, is this because if you think about it, what happens is that the student, during the entire conversation, explained to the administrator that he had a problem. He received a notice from the college saying that he did not pay, although he always argued and he always, expressed that he actually paid the tuition. But he received a notice saying, hey, you didn't pay or we will kick you out of classes. So in this case, this is the correct answer because that is exactly the problem of the student. As I say, you simply ask yourself, what did the passage say about this? And what the passage said about the student is that he received a notice saying, hey, pay because you are late, right? You have not paid. That is what the expression his payment was late means. It's not the same word or not the same phrase used in the conversation because they never said, hey, your payment was late, or the student never said, I received a notice saying that my payment was late. He never said that, right? What he said is that I received a notice saying that I have not paid my tuition when I actually paid. And he actually uses some threatening language. That is what the student says, right? But he never uses this expression. My payment was late, but here it says that I have to pay and my payment is late. He never says that, right? But even when he doesn't say that, the student never says that his payment was late. This is the correct answer because, as I told you, even with different words, it is expressing the same information. You don't need to discard an answer just because it doesn't use the same words that the student or that the professor used. It can be different words, but the problem is that it needs to express, as I say, the same information, maybe with different words. It doesn't matter. But if it expresses the same information mentioned in the reading passage, or excuse me, in this case, in the listening passage, that is the correct answer. And in this case, we see that he received a notice that his payment was late. That is to say that he didn't pay. And this is exactly what the conversation said. The other responses are false. He received another student's tuition. That is not true. He never said, my name is Carlos, and I received a notice saying that Alvaro didn't pay, but I'm not Alvaro. He didn't say that, right? Or he forgot to pay tuition during a holiday week. It's incorrect because the conversation actually says that he paid during a holiday week, right? Or D is not a correct answer as well because he never was barred from attending classes. He was afraid of being barred from attending classes, but he was not barred from attending classes already. Can you see, dear students, any question about this one? Anaí, Camila, Jorge, Sergio? Fabiana, Lucia, any question about this type of question?
No question.
questions.
All right. Fantastic. There you are. Let's go with the final type of question that we're going to discuss today. This is called the attitude question. Okay, so please pay attention to this one, dear students, because this is a special type of question. Okay, this is a type of question that you're only going to find, I'm so sorry, in the listening section, not in any other section. It's not repetitive, it's special. Okay, so listen to this one. The attitude question. What is the attitude question? Attitude questions, basically, like function questions, often deal with information that is not just given by what the speaker says, but also by how they say it. They will ask you about what information the speaker's intonation and word choice give about the speaker's feelings and relationship towards the subject. Let me give you an example. Imagine, okay, dear students, that I am somebody who has an exposition, all right? And I have to defend, all right? I have to defend, let's say, what could it be? I have to defend the position that drugs should be legal, let's say in my country. Because maybe my professor said, hey, your assignment for next class is going to be making a presentation about why should drugs be legal in this country. But imagine that even if I make that presentation, maybe my opinion about that particular subject is completely different. Maybe I'm somebody who is opposed to the idea that drugs should be legalized in my country. So when I make my exposition, maybe because of the way that I speak, imagine that on that day on my exposition, I say, today I'm going to discuss why drugs should be legalized in our country. The reasons why drugs should be legalized are the following ones. All right, let's go with the first one. The first one is, imagine that I speak like that. What could you tell about my personal opinion of the subject if I make an exposition like that? Even although my exposition is going to be defending why should drugs be legalized in my country, I think it's noticeable, right? That if I speak like that, well, let's go with the first argument. The first argument is that drugs are actually good for society. I mean, like, if I speak like that, of course you can know, hey, he's making an exposition about why drugs should be legalized, but it's obvious that he disagrees with that. So as you can see, sometimes our opinion differs from what we say. So you need to be very careful in this case. Why? Because this type of question is not going to ask you about what the professor says, but it's going to ask you about what the professor thinks about what he says. It's going to ask you about the personal opinion of the topic the professor is discussing. Okay? The professor obviously has an opinion, has a personal opinion. And this question is going to ask you about the personal opinion that the professor has about his topic, not what he's saying, but his personal opinion about the subject he's discussing. All right? Notice that. Now, for example, let's see this particular illustration. Okay, so in this case, dear students, let me remind you that yesterday we listened to this particular lecture, but we're going to listen to it again. Okay, so let's get into this lecture. Please try to apply everything that I have given you yesterday, recommendations for taking notes. Let us listen to this again. It's Botticelli's discussion, and we're going to use it to respond to this question. Okay, let's go.
How many of you have heard of Alessandro di Mariano Giovanni Filippi? No? Nobody? Well, let me put it this way. How many of you are familiar with the work of an artist called Sandro Botticelli, or even just Botticelli? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's definitely an easier name to remember. But a lot of you might also be surprised to learn that this artist, who we know so well, really fell out of favor from shortly after the Renaissance until the late 19th century. That's right, it's really only within the past 150 years that Botticelli's work has returned to popularity. And yet within that time, his name, well, his alias, has become synonymous with a kind of grace and beauty that characterizes the best of Renaissance painting. Patronized by the famous Medici family, Botticelli was celebrated during his lifetime for using these qualities of grace and beauty in his artwork. And while his earliest paintings often used religious subject matter, well, we've seen this throughout the course, haven't we, how common this was? These aren't the works that are most celebrated today. In fact, let me ask you, what are the paintings that you most associate with Botticelli? If you're thinking The Birth of Venus, you're definitely not alone. The Birth of Venus is definitely one of Botticelli's better-known works. His masterpiece, Primavera, was painted 3 years earlier. That's another one that you might know. And it was done in the same vein as The Birth of Venus. Primavera means spring in Italian, and here's a slide of the painting up on the board. These are works that didn't rely entirely on the iconography of the Catholic Church. While we do see some holdovers from Botticelli's earlier works, the main subjects of these paintings go back to traditions of gods and goddesses. Note the extensive use of nature as a metaphor, in addition to the nudity of some of the figures, or the skimpy clothes used to cover them. Actually, Botticelli was extremely religious and would end up painting work for churches and cathedrals, using Catholic iconography for the rest of his life. The Madonna and Child, for example, was a popular subject. Because of the popularity of his work, it's kind of strange that he fell out of favor. His paintings were in churches, chapels, and villas all over Italy. But in 1502, almost a decade before he died in 1510, Botticelli was already disappearing from the public eye. Even though he had painted frescoes in the Sistine Chapel, Botticelli's work was commonly overlooked in favor of that of his neighboring artist, Michelangelo. It took almost 3 centuries before an English collector, William Young Otley, bought a Botticelli in Italy and brought it back to England in 1799. Even then, the painting wasn't exhibited in public for almost another 60 years, when its next owner, William Fuller Maitland, lent it to an Art Treasures exhibition in 1856. There, more than 1 million viewers saw it, and art historians began to take note. Some of these historians had already taken an interest in Botticelli's Sistine Chapel frescoes, and his reputation again began to blossom. By the end of the century, Botticelli's works had been extensively admired. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood found inspiration in them. The first monograph, or book of paintings, by the artist was published in 1893. Botticelli had the last laugh. In the first 20 years of the 20th century, more books were written about his art than about the art of any other painter, dead or alive. It just goes to show you, the art world is ruled by trends. Just because a particular artist isn't popular at a given moment, it doesn't mean that there's no value in his or her work, or that it won't be popular once more, even if it does take 3 centuries.
There you are, dear students. Fantastic. Now we have listened to this again, and the reason is because we needed to remind the passage in order to respond this question correctly. So the question, an attitude question for this particular lecture would be this one: what is the professor's attitude? Look at it, personal opinion, in other words, towards Botticelli. A, she enjoys some of his work, but not all of it. B, she sees him as an obscure yet important artist. C, she believes his career teaches us about larger social structures. D, she does not know why students don't know more about him. There you are with the possible answers. Now, let us see some recommendations before. Your objective, dear students, in this question is to deduce what type of personal position or opinion does the speaker have with relation to one specific topic. This position or opinion will come up to you very clearly, all right, by paying attention to the wording he is using and the intonation he uses. These are the 2 most important factors you need to consider in order to know somebody's opinion of a topic. Intonation, that is to say, how he's speaking, what pitch of voice he's using, what, let's say, velocity he's using, how's his voice, right? Sometimes we have some type of voices for ironical commentaries like ha, like haha, right? That's very interesting. That is ironical, right? Or and that is because we are actually making a joke, right? So what the intonation of somebody tells very much about what he considers and what he believes of something. And also the word choice, that is to say, what words is the person utilizing in order to discuss and refer to a topic or subject, tells very much, says very much about his or her personal opinion. So pay attention to those particular subjects. Personal position can be defined by looking at 2 different aspects: wording, the words the person is using, and the intonation he uses, right? But fantastic, that's it. So What is the correct answer in this case? Let me tell you that the correct answer would be she sees him as an obscure yet important artist. Maybe you're wondering, why is this the correct answer? I tell you why. You can know that she considers him to be an important artist because during the entire listening passage, she referred to him in a very respectful and actually, I would say, admiring manner. She was always admiring him. She always said something like, we're going to discuss somebody who, at the end, right, she said, and that is what can shows you that not just because somebody is passing the popular, or excuse me, is unpopular in the past, that doesn't mean that in the future is not going to value about his incredible works, right? At the beginning, actually, the professor mentions a lot of things, right? Have you ever heard about Botticelli? How his wonderful works have been identified with a particular time or movement in art history, right? She expresses admiration for him, right? So given her her intonation about him, very respectfully, very admiring, you can know that she considered him to be an important artist, right? Also, the words she used, as I tell you, she always said at the beginning, have you ever heard about Botticelli, how his beautiful paintings, his technique has been associated with, this movement in art? She expresses that, and that gives you the idea that she considers that this is an important artist. Now, what about the word obscure? Let me tell you, this is the correct answer, and I want to give you this recommendation. Whenever you read this word in the TOEFL exam, obscure, it means religious and fantastical references. For some reason, for ETS, obscure has to do with religion and fantastical things. I'm not sure why, but that is their opinion. That obscurity has to do with religion and with fantastical images or expressions. So given that the professor discusses Botticelli's religious works and comments on that very much, you can see that she considered him to be a very much obscure artist because she discusses, right? He was somebody very much famous for having participated in a lot of religious expositions that were actually sometimes, let's say, obviated by other of his colleagues, like Michelangelo, etc., etc. So she comments on the fact that he was somebody who painted for the church, for religion. And that's the reason why for ETS, the correct answer will be that she considers him to be an obscure and important artist. Is there any question, dear students, about this one? Any type of question, anything that you could clarify? Jorge, Anaí, Camila, Sergio?
For me, everything's clear. Thank you.
Everything's fantastic. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Okay. So if there are no questions, then we're going to stop our class here. I think it's been very much fruitful. Tomorrow we're going to discuss a little thing of theory, and then the rest of the class is going to be for practice. Okay. So please don't miss tomorrow's class. Don't go yet. I need to take your assistance. And okay, as I say, please, dear students, collaborate me as well, as I told you yesterday, with a little poll that we're always going to fill. Okay. Before we finish our classes, you know that you help me a lot by filling it positively. All right. So please look at your screen, collaborate me with that. And when I call out your name, please say present, just for the evidence that you've been here, and you can receive your certificate at the end of these courses, right? Fantastic. So let's get into this. Is here present? Let me see. Is here present Lucia Gabriela Aguirre?
Present. Present.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucia. What about Raisa Bolivia? All right. What about Sergio Andres Heredia?
Present.
Thank you very much, Sergio. What about, sorry, this? What about Rafael Ezequiel? All right. And now the other group, Ramirez Camila.
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Camila. Okay, before we continue with the list, please, dear students, help me with another poll. Just on Wednesdays, we're going to have to fill 2 polls. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. You know, it's the company that requires me to fill 2 different polls. It's a very similar poll, and it's actually shorter. So please look at your screen and help me with that other poll very rapidly, just on Wednesday, okay? The other days, we're just going to have 1 poll, but I'm so sorry for bothering you. So what about the second one? Mayra Alejandra Perez is here, present? She didn't make it. Salguero Fabiana?
Present.
Thank you very much, Fabiana. Fantastic. What about Quiroga Adriana? Okay. Zúñiga Sergio Nogales. Right. Alondra Lisette Urquizo. José Miguel Quiroga. Right. Anaí Estefanía.
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Anaí. And finally, Jorge Alberto Benitez.
Present.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody that I have not mentioned, maybe? Because you have not been included in the list? No? Okay, I think that nobody. Fantastic. Okay, dear students, see you tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of practice. And thank you very much for having me with me, okay? Have a wonderful night. See you later.
Thank you, Carlos. Good night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.